Hello. My name is Avendaro. And on the day of my brother's funeral, while I stood over his casket, his wife posted a photo sipping champagne in Cancun. With another man. She toasted new beginnings. And that's when I got the message. From my brother. The one we just buried. Link to next. The rain in Asheville never really stopped that morning, it only softened, whispering against the stained glass windows. The rain in Asheville never really stopped that morning, it only softened, whispering against the stained glass windows as if the sky itself was trying to apologize. I stood beside my brother's closed casket, fingers trembling around the funeral program that still smelled faintly of wet ink and lilies. The church felt too small for all the silence inside it. The seat marked "Spouse" stood empty. I stared at it until my eyes blurred, until the soft murmur of voices behind me became a low, humming judgment. Someone said, "Poor Seraphine. She must be too heartbroken to come." Another replied, "She adored him. Some people just can't face it." They didn't know my brother's wife. They didn't know that Seraphine adored being seen loving him. I wanted to turn around and scream, to tell them that love doesn't skip funerals, but my throat closed. So I kept still. I just counted. 1, 2, 3, 38 people came to say goodbye. Not one of them was her. When the service ended, the pastor shook my hand gently, like I might shatter. I walked outside into the drizzle. The ground gave a soft squelch under my heels. I wanted the earth to swallow me. Instead, it only took the flowers I dropped over the grave, their white petals bruising against the mud. At home that night, the house echoed with the kind of quiet that makes you aware of every heartbeat. I sat in front of the glow of my phone, scrolling through the messages I'd ignored all day. Sympathy, condolences, prayers. And then, her name. Seraphine Cade. Public profile. Verified. My thumb froze. There she was, wearing a champagne-colored dress, the ocean glowing behind her like liquid glass. Griffin Maddox stood beside her, his hand curled around her waist. Both laughing, faces tilted toward the sun. The caption read, "Life is just beginning." I didn't breathe. The screen light flickered against the tears running down my face, tracing salt across my lips. While I buried my brother, she toasted freedom. I wanted to throw the phone, to break it, but my fingers refused to move. I took a screenshot instead. My hand was shaking so hard the image came out slightly blurred. Still, the proof was there. The comments poured in beneath the post, people writing, "So proud of you, Seraphine," and "He'd want you to be happy." Happy. The word made something twist inside my chest. The rain hadn't stopped by morning. It never does here, it just becomes part of the air. I made coffee I couldn't taste and opened my laptop. My inbox was flooded with reminders from the memorial site Seraphine had set up, the one she'd begged everyone to contribute to. I clicked through out of habit. The first picture loaded was from last Christmas. Caleb stood in the middle, tall and smiling, his arm around Seraphine's shoulders. I remembered standing on his other side that day, holding a glass of cider and laughing. But in the version on the screen, my face was gone, cropped clean out of the frame. My throat burned. I pressed my fingers against the edge of the photo as if I could step back into it. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been erased. Every memory she could reach, she was rewriting, polishing the story until it gleamed the way she wanted. Caleb, the tragic husband. Seraphine, the radiant widow. Me, the invisible sister. The coffee went cold before I realized I'd stopped breathing. She didn't forget to come to the funeral. She didn't make a mistake. She made a choice. I opened my mouth, whispered into the empty room, "If this is how she rewrites history, I'll make sure the truth has my name in it." My voice barely carried beyond the refrigerator's hum. Just then, the phone buzzed again. I expected another hollow condolence, but the screen glowed with a number I didn't recognize. No contact name. No subject. Only a short, precise message. "Come to my house. Now." For a second, my mind refused to make sense of it. My pulse jumped against my ribs. The number wasn't local, but the words were Caleb's. The punctuation, the spacing, even the clipped tone. Rain pressed harder against the window, steady and relentless. My reflection looked back at me, pale, uncertain, shaking. I picked up my keys from the counter. Some part of me already knew this wasn't over. The rain had followed me out of town, washing the road ahead into a streak of silver. I drove without telling a soul where I was going, the wipers sweeping in steady rhythm with my heartbeat. Asheville's city lights disappeared in the mirror behind me, swallowed by the mist curling down from the Blue Ridge Mountains. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the ache in my chest reminded me to exhale. Caleb's house sat at the end of the road like a memory that refused to die. The "For Sale" sign leaned against the fence, half buried in the grass. The porch light glowed faintly through the rain. No car in the driveway. No sign of life. And yet the message on my phone pulsed in my mind, those 5 words. Come to my house. Now. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Maybe it was a cruel prank, maybe grief had finally broken something inside me. But the punctuation, the tone, it was him. Caleb always used periods where most people used ellipses. He said dots looked indecisive. He wasn't. I parked 2 houses down and sat there listening to the rain tick against the windshield. The street was empty. The air smelled like wet pine and metal. I could feel my pulse in my palms. I reached for the key still hanging from my keychain, the one he'd given me 5 years ago when he said, "You never know when you'll need a safe place." The lock turned without resistance. The air inside was cold and still, carrying the scent of dust and lemon cleaner. My shoes pressed soft prints into the carpet, and every step seemed to echo louder than the last. I whispered his name before I meant to. Caleb. No answer. The house looked untouched, pictures on the wall, a mug still sitting by the sink. His jacket hung near the door, the one with the torn cuff. I touched it with the tips of my fingers, half expecting it to crumble like old paper. Then a sound, just one board creaking in the kitchen. I froze. Caleb. My voice broke in the middle. Footsteps. Slow. Familiar. He appeared at the edge of the light, thinner than I remembered, eyes hollow, beard grown in uneven patches. But alive. Breathing. For a second, my body forgot how to move. The air vanished from the room. Then I took one step, then another, until I was standing in front of him. I reached out, hesitant, shaking. My fingertips brushed his arm. Warm. He whispered, "I'm sorry I made you think I was gone." I could barely form words. What the hell happened to you? He sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd once laughed over burnt pancakes and broken hearts. His voice was raw. I didn't die, Avon. I had to disappear. I dropped into the chair opposite him, staring. The light flickered over his face, over the lines of exhaustion carved deep into his skin. He looked older than the funeral photo. She was going to destroy me, he said quietly. Seraphine. She found out about the fraud I'd uncovered at the firm. She thought if I vanished, she'd get everything, the accounts, the insurance, the sympathy. My mind spun. So you faked your own death? I didn't plan it that way. It just became the only way out. He rubbed his temples, eyes closing. A doctor friend helped. It was supposed to be temporary. I didn't think she'd move on this fast. I pulled out my phone, opened the image I'd been staring at all night, Seraphine laughing under tropical sunlight, champagne glass in hand, Griffin Maddox's arm around her. I slid the screen across the table. She's already celebrating. Caleb stared at the photo, the color draining from his face. She sold my watch, didn't she? I nodded. Luxury resale site. The same one she used for your suits. He let out a low, bitter laugh that sounded more like a sob. 8 years of marriage, and she couldn't wait 8 days. The refrigerator hummed behind us, the sound too steady for a moment like this. He pressed his hands flat on the table, veins standing out under his skin. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I stayed dead, she'd leave you alone. I swallowed hard. She didn't. She cut me out of everything. Even the photos. We sat there for a long time, saying nothing. The silence between us filled the house like fog, heavy but familiar. I reached for the mug sitting on the counter, poured us both some water. My hands steadied around the glass. She's not done, I said quietly. She'll spin this into another story. She always does. He met my ice. You're right. But you always were the one who noticed what everyone else ignored. I let the words settle inside me. They felt like both apology and permission. We're not going to let her win, I said. He nodded slowly, the faintest trace of the old Caleb surfacing. They buried my name, Avon, don't let them spend it too. The storm outside had eased to a soft drizzle, tapping against the windows like a heartbeat. I looked around the room, the framed photos, the folded laundry, the faint smell of coffee that lingered from a life interrupted. It was the same house I'd walked into countless times before, but now every detail felt fragile, borrowed from a past that refused to stay buried. I stood, moving quietly toward the front door. My reflection in the window looked older, steadier. Caleb followed me halfway down the hallway. "I'll find a way to fix this," he said. "I know you will," I answered softly. "But this time, you won't do it alone." The night air hit my face when I stepped outside, cool and sharp. The road glistened under the streetlights. I took a deep breath, the kind that tastes like beginning again. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. The next morning began gray again, the kind of gray that seeps into your bones before coffee can reach you. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, watching a line of strangers shuffle through security. My hands rested on the steering wheel longer than they needed to, as if holding on to something familiar might delay what I already knew. Once I walked in, I could never pretend ignorance again. Inside, the air smelled of paper, ink, and disinfectant. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flat and unfeeling. The clerk at the archive window looked up at me over her glasses, her voice too polite to sound human. "Name of the deceased?" "Caleb Varelli," I said, forcing the words through the knot in my throat. "I'm his sister. Next of kin." She tapped on her keyboard, then disappeared behind a shelf wall lined with manila folders. My palms were damp when she returned with a thin envelope sealed in brittle tape. "Certified copy of the will and testament. You'll need to sign here." The pen slipped in my fingers. I stared at the line where my name was supposed to go. For one quiet second, I thought of Caleb's laugh echoing through this very town, the way he'd always scribble his initials over grocery lists, over everything. I signed and took the envelope. At the table in the corner, I opened it carefully, pulling out the thick document as though it might bruise. The words blurred until I blinked hard. Then they cut clear. Her name was everywhere. Seraphine Cade, executor, sole beneficiary, power of attorney, end-of-life contact. My name wasn't anywhere. She hadn't just erased me. She'd rewritten him. My breath caught. The paper trembled in my hand, a soft whisper that filled the sterile room. At the bottom of the page, a name I hadn't expected jumped out like a trapdoor opening, witnessed by Malik Dresner. I knew that name. Caleb's firm had used him once for compliance paperwork. The same man Seraphine called a friend who understood discretion. I folded the document slowly, pressing its edges flat with deliberate calm. Fine, I thought, if she's writing fiction, I'll bring the receipts. The clerk smiled politely as I left, unaware that she'd just handed me the first weapon I'd ever owned. The courthouse steps groaned under my shoes. Outside, the wind picked up, tossing loose leaves in circles. Somewhere between the courthouse door and my car, the memory slammed into me. It was 4 years earlier, Caleb's wedding day. The church hallway smelled of roses and champagne. I'd stepped out for air, overheard Seraphine's voice drifting from around the corner, sugar-coated and sharp. "She's the quiet type," she was saying to a guest I didn't recognize. "Easy to ignore. I like that in a sister-in-law." The laughter that followed was soft and mean, the kind that hides behind lipstick. Back then, I'd told myself it didn't matter. Every family has someone like me, the one people forget to introduce, the one they keep out of photos because there wasn't enough space. But standing here now, that memory felt different. It wasn't social. It was strategic. She'd known how invisible I was. And she'd used it. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cold against my skin. "They didn't overlook me," I whispered. "They planned around me." The dashboard clock blinked 11:47. I drove without remembering where I meant to go, until I found myself back at Caleb's house. The same porch light, the same creaking steps. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, guided by instinct more than sense. The afternoon light fell across his study, slanted through the blinds in dusty gold stripes. It looked the same as the night before, but something in the air had shifted. Maybe it was me. I began opening drawers, flipping through folders, searching the way someone searches for air underwater. Receipts, bank ledgers, notes written in his careful print, small pieces of a life too ordered to end in chaos. Then I saw the uneven line of books on the top shelf. One leaned slightly forward, like it wanted to speak. I climbed the chair, tugged it free. Behind it, a thin crack in the wall. I slid my fingers into it and pulled until something heavy and stiff came loose. A leather-bound notebook, edges frayed, smelling faintly of ink and cedar. Caleb's handwriting covered the first page. January 4th, she's moved the funds again. I asked about the missing invoices, she said I was imagining things. January 15th, Malik's involvement feels off. If I disappear, Avon will know where to look. The numbers don't lie. My throat tightened. I turned page after page, entries that painted a slow collapse, a man cornered in his own home. The final entry stopped me cold. If you find this, it means I didn't trust the people who claimed to love me. But I still trust you. For a long moment, I just sat there, feeling the weight of the notebook in my hands. The air in the study felt heavy, alive. I could almost hear him breathing in the margins. She took your name, your face, your death, I whispered. But not your truth. I tucked the notebook into my bag and stood near the window. Outside, the evening sun slipped behind the hills, leaving the sky bruised and blue. A feeling rose in me, not quite peace, not quite fury, but something sharper, steadier. That night, I stayed up reading every word. Each sentence felt like a heartbeat leading me somewhere I hadn't dared to go before. She'd thought she buried him. She'd thought she silenced me. But paper doesn't lie, and now I had his voice written in ink that refused to fade. By morning the ink of Caleb's words still lived beneath my eyelids. I kept hearing his handwriting, if that makes sense, the rhythm of his thoughts, the ache in every curve of the letters. The first sound that cut through the fog was my phone buzzing on the counter. A message from the family group chat blinked at me, please respect Seraphine's privacy. No speculation. We're moving forward together. Together. Without me. I opened the chat. My name was gone. No avatar, no history, no trace I had ever been part of it. It was like they'd decided to scrub me out, the same way she'd cropped my face from the pictures. I called Mom. Straight to voicemail. I called again, hoping the second ring might mean she'd changed her mind, that her daughter's voice would cut through the spell Seraphine had cast over all of them. Nothing. I tried logging into the memorial page, the one Seraphine claimed was for healing. A red warning flashed across the screen, access denied. Account privileges revoked. They hadn't even confronted me. They just erased me quietly, like deleting an old file. My throat tightened. I scrolled through their posts, Mom writing how proud she was of Seraphine for carrying herself with grace. My aunt commenting, she's handling grief with such strength. Each word felt like a small betrayal dressed as comfort. I took screenshots. Every single one. The phone buzzed again. This time, Caleb. They're trying to make you unstable. That's how she started with me. I stared at his message until the letters blurred. I could almost hear his voice. Calm, rational, a little tired. The way he used to sound before the light went out in his eyes. I typed back, then we'll stay grounded. She won't get both of us. The rest of the day moved slowly, like walking through syrup. I drove to the county records office. The clerk behind the counter looked too young to remember when paper mattered, but she smiled politely when I asked for a certified copy of Caleb's death certificate. It'll take a few minutes, she said. The air smelled faintly of toner and dust. I leaned on the counter, watching her sort through files in the back. My fingers traced the rim of the cold marble surface. When she returned, she handed me the document in a plastic sleeve. Sorry for your loss, she said softly. I nodded, murmured something polite, and stepped into the hallway light. The paper crinkled as I unfolded it. Date of death, May 17th. Time, 6:12 a.m. Place, Mission Hospital. Physician, Dr. R. Kellner. Something prickled at the back of my mind. Caleb's health records, his own copies, were saved on an old drive I'd kept after helping him organize his taxes. I remembered the timestamp on his last hospital intake, 7:03 a.m. How could he have been declared dead before he was even admitted? I sat on a bench, the air conditioning hissing above me. My pulse slowed to a cold, deliberate beat. If they could falsify time, what else did they manipulate? I took a photo of the certificate and sent it to Caleb. His reply came fast. That doctor isn't real. I pressed the document flat against my lap. Okay, I whispered to the empty hallway. So we follow the paper trail. That night, I drove to Rowan's house. He was one of the few people who'd never bought into Seraphine's version of reality. His living room doubled as an office, glowing with the soft blue light of too many computer screens. You look like you haven't slept in days, he said when I walked in. I haven't. He poured coffee into a chipped mug. Tell me what you need. Proof, I said. Something she can't spin. We spent hours scrolling through banking logs, old email headers, transfer records. Numbers lined up like soldiers, all neat and damning. Then there it was, one transaction that shouldn't exist. An account registered to Griffin Maddox had received a wire transfer 2 days before Caleb's so-called death. Same bank Seraphine used for her charity fund. Rowan leaned back, rubbing his eyes. She didn't even hide it. That's arrogance. On another screen, he pulled up a record of the life insurance policy. Date of signature, May 15th. 2 days before. My stomach clenched. She planned it down to the hour. She always does, Rowan said. He clicked through one more file, a series of IP logins from Seraphine's tablet to Caleb's business portal. She accessed his financial accounts 48 hours before the death certificate was filed. Same device, same location as her house. The silence between us was thick. I could feel the vibration of the servers under the desk, a low hum that matched my heartbeat. She didn't just steal his life, I said quietly. She choreographed it. Rowan nodded, scrolling through the last of the files. It looks like a business plan. Every dollar accounted for. I leaned closer, the glow from the monitor lighting the edge of my face. Then we use her precision against her. He smiled faintly. You sound like him. Maybe I'm starting to understand him, I said. We exported the files, encrypted copies that would be impossible to trace back. As the data transferred, I thought of Seraphine sitting somewhere in that perfect house of hers, rehearsing her grief for whoever was still watching. She believed control was safety. But she'd forgotten the one thing Caleb taught me: the truth doesn't need an audience, it just needs evidence. The night ended quietly. I thanked Rowan and stepped outside. The air was cool, the moonlight sharp against the damp pavement. I drove home with the flash drive in my pocket, its weight small but powerful. At home, I placed it beside the leather notebook on the kitchen table. The two looked right together, his words and her numbers, two sides of the same story finally meeting. I sent Caleb one last text before going to bed. We're close. The reply came minutes later. Check your email tomorrow. There's something you need to hear before she deletes it. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, a strange calm settling over me. Healing never came fast. It came quietly, step by step, through the noise of what others tried to bury. Morning crept in quietly, thin light stretching across my living room like a cautious truth. I opened my laptop before coffee, before I had time to question what I was about to see. Rowan's message sat at the top of my inbox, marked urgent. The subject line read, "Recovered file, listen now." The air felt thick as I plugged in my headphones. One click in the past came roaring back, no longer in my control. A woman's voice filled the silence. Smooth. Confident. Cruel. He won't fight, Seraphine said, her tone almost bored. He'll fold. Men like Caleb break before they speak. There was laughter, hers, light and airy, and another voice I didn't recognize at first, then realized had to be Griffin Maddox. He said something low and she answered, amused, "Once I get the payout, we're out." Simple as that. The clip ended abruptly. No static. No edits. Every word crisp and deliberate. I replayed it 3 times, not because I needed to hear more, but because I couldn't stop listening. Each repetition burned deeper, stripping away every last shred of doubt I had clung to. She didn't just grieve wrong. She rehearsed it. Planned it before the body was cold. I sat there in the dimness, my reflection faint in the black laptop screen. A strange calm settled over me, something stronger than anger. Strategy. By noon, I'd brewed a new pot of coffee and assembled every piece of evidence I had: the forged certificate, the bank logs, the transfers, the photos of her on the beach, the screenshots of her public sympathy posts. The notebook. The audio clip. I opened a new email and began to type. Subject, Caleb's truth. Each click of the keyboard sounded like the beat of my own pulse. The message was simple. This is not rumor. This is proof. I attached the files. I added every family address I could find. Cousins. Uncles. Even mom. My hand hesitated over her name for only a second before I clicked it. I hit send. The message whooshed out into the world like a stone breaking water. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, waiting for something: fear, regret, relief. Nothing came. Then my phone lit up. Across Asheville, a web of light flickered to life, notifications spreading through the family like wildfire. Screens lighting up over morning coffee. Over dinners. Over wine glasses. Seraphine's PR email dinged somewhere in her carefully curated world. Griffin's text arrived next, a sharp ping. You sent it, didn't you? I didn't reply. Caleb's message followed. It begins. The words steadied me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. The hours crawled toward evening. No one called. No one texted. Silence grew heavy in the house. It felt like the air just before a storm, too still, too expectant. By 6, my phone vibrated with a group invitation, family dinner at Aunt Celeste's. To talk, it said. I didn't bother changing clothes. Celeste's dining room smelled like pot roast and tension. The table stretched long and polished, covered in lace and untouched dishes. Every seat was filled except the one at the end, where Seraphine sat, pale and rigid, a crystal glass shaking faintly in her hand. I walked in last. Every eye turned to me, then away. No one spoke. The air hummed with the sound of cutlery being set down, throats clearing, quiet disapproval. Mom's hand trembled as she placed her napkin beside her plate. She wouldn't look at me. Celeste kept glancing towards Seraphine, as if waiting for her to perform her usual grace. Seraphine didn't speak either. Her lipstick was lighter than usual, her hair a shade duller. But her posture, perfect as always. Her gaze finally met mine, and I saw the panic hiding under her poise. I said nothing. I simply placed my phone in the center of the table and pressed play. Her voice filled the room again. He won't fight. He'll fold. Men like Caleb break before they speak. The laughter that followed wasn't in the room, it came from the past, from the woman they'd chosen to believe over me. Celeste's fork clattered against the plate. My mother whispered, "Oh my God." Seraphine's face barely moved. Only her jaw tightened. "That's fabricated," she said softly. Anyone could have doctored that. Rowan had anticipated that. I tapped the screen again, revealing the timestamp and data verification overlay. It was pulled from your phone, Seraphine. The one you sold last week. You deleted the cloud backup, but not before he mirrored it. Her lips parted slightly. No sound came out. Around the table, no one defended her. No one defended me either, but I didn't need them to. They didn't yell, I thought. They didn't accuse. They didn't have to. The silence did all the work. Seraphine rose slowly, smoothing her dress. I think this conversation is beneath us, she said. Her voice cracked just enough for the room to hear it. Mom whispered, "Sit down, Seraphine." She didn't. She picked up her purse, her perfect mask splintering. For the first time, I saw her shake. I looked around the table, faces I'd known all my life, now looking at her the way they once looked at me. With disbelief. With quiet judgment. Caleb had been right. People don't change their loyalties, they just change the target of their whispers. As I left, Celeste caught my arm. Her voice was barely a breath. I should have listened sooner. I nodded. You still can. Outside, the evening air felt strangely soft. Clouds moved slow across the sky, heavy but kind. When I reached home, I poured a glass of water and stared at my inbox again. Messages piled up, some apologies, some excuses, one from Mom that only said, "I don't know what to believe anymore." I typed back, "Then start by believing what you heard." The night stretched quiet and long. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. Before midnight, a new notification appeared, Seraphine's social account posting live. The caption, "I have something to confess." I closed the laptop. I didn't need to watch. Some truths didn't need my voice to echo, they could speak for themselves, gently and without me. The next morning, sunlight filtered through my blinds, thin and pale, as if afraid to wake me. I reached for my phone automatically, a habit I hadn't broken even when the world started burning around me. The first notification that lit the screen wasn't from Caleb or Rowan, it was Seraphine's face, frozen mid-sob, under the caption, "I have something to confess." I pressed play. The video wasn't live. It had been recorded carefully, like everything she did, angles chosen to flatter, lighting soft enough to suggest vulnerability. Her eyes were swollen just enough to pass for grief, makeup smeared in the right places to look accidental. Caleb was a troubled man, she began, voice trembling but steady enough to sound brave. I tried to protect him, but I failed. She paused, sniffled, then leaned closer to the camera. I didn't want to say this, but he hurt me emotionally. He was slipping. The stress, the anxiety, it consumed him. I was the one who had to hold us together. I could almost hear her rehearsing the lines in her head. Each word shaped to catch sympathy like raindrops in a cup. My jaw clenched. She was rewriting history again. But this time, I had the pen. I watched until the end, through every calculated tear, every perfect pause. She closed with, "I hope the world can find compassion for both of us. Grief makes monsters of good people." No, I thought quietly, you didn't lose him to grief. You built the monster yourself. I shut the laptop. The silence after her voice felt louder than the video itself. Then my inbox pinged. A message from Caleb. Check the attachment. It's the full audio. She didn't know the first file was only half the story. I opened it. The same voices. The same room. But longer this time. Clearer. Seraphine's laugh filled the speakers again, bright and cruel. He'll be remembered as the broken one, she said. I'll be the brave one who survived him. That's how these stories go. People love a widow who smiles through pain. Griffin chuckled, his voice dripping with indulgence. And when the check's clear? She answered without missing a beat. Then I'll finally be free. The clip ended. No edits. No doubt. No way to spin this into anything other than what it was. My fingers hovered over the keyboard only a moment before moving on instinct. I crafted another email, short and surgical. Subject, she lied. Here's proof. I attached the uncut file, the insurance forms, the timestamps. Every lie catalogued, every manipulation preserved. My cursor lingered over the send button long enough for a thought to slip through. This isn't revenge. It's correction. Click. The sound was soft, almost gentle, but it shook something loose in me. By afternoon, the internet caught fire. Screens lit up with her voice, cold, gleeful, undeniable. He'll be remembered as the broken one, played on repeat in 1,000 living rooms. Her followers turned fast. Sympathy curdled into disgust. The comments read like stones being thrown. All this time, she fooled us. She's not grieving, she's performing. Caleb texted. It's everywhere. I never thought I'd feel relief like this. I typed back, truth has a longer shelf life than lies. He replied with one word, always. By evening, I couldn't look at another screen. I drove. No destination, just movement. The air outside was heavy, the kind of heat that stuck to your skin. My headlights swept over Seraphine's neighborhood, and before I could talk myself out of it, I slowed down in front of her house. From the road, everything looked the same, perfect hedges, gleaming windows. But behind the glass, I imagined chaos. The world she'd built so carefully collapsing under the weight of her own words. Then, in my rearview mirror, I saw it, flashes of red and blue reflecting off the wet asphalt. 2 dark cars, no sirens, just the quiet certainty of federal agents who already knew the ending. They walked up the driveway, knocked once. The door opened. She stepped out, still in her polished blouse, still pretending to be misunderstood. But this time, no camera was there to catch her better angles. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. Caleb's message arrived while I waited at the next light. She's gone. I stared at the words until another ping followed. You did it. I typed slowly. No. The truth did. They can't use your name anymore. He sent back a single dot. It meant thank you. It meant goodbye, maybe. At home, I stood by the window, watching the reflection of the streetlights ripple across the glass. For months, every breath I'd taken had carried her shadow. Now, it was gone, lifted from my lungs like smoke leaving an open flame. The next morning, her story was everywhere again, but this time she didn't control the narrative. News headlines called it the widow's scheme. They spoke Caleb's name without pity. They said whistleblower instead of unstable. I brewed coffee slowly, quietly, gently. The sound of the drip filled the silence that used to ache. The tears didn't save her. But the truth saved him. And somehow, it saved me too. The morning after the headlines broke, I found myself parked outside the old diner off I-26, same chipped green booth seats, same waitress who still called everyone sweetheart. But everything else was different. Across from me sat a man who looked both familiar and foreign. His posture was the same, but the beard was trimmed short, the hair darker and cropped. His clothes were more nondescript, like someone trying not to leave footprints. Robert Lake, I said, letting the name sit between us. Caleb gave a soft laugh. Not very creative, huh? But they said blending in is the point. The smile didn't reach his eyes. He stirred the sugar into his coffee slowly, deliberately. Like he needed something to focus on that wasn't me. You sure this is goodbye? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. It's the only one I get, he replied quietly. I reached into my bag and slid a small box across the table. What's this? Just something real, I said. He opened it and blinked twice. Inside was the wedding band he'd left behind and Dad's old pocket knife, the one he carried around since we were kids, the one that used to make him feel braver than he actually was. He touched them both like they were bones of another life. We lost everything, I whispered, but I didn't lose you. His throat tightened, and I saw his hands tremble. You saved me, Avon. Not just from her, but from being erased. We sat in silence after that. The kind you don't rush. The kind that understands what words can't fix. He left first. He always hated long goodbyes. I watched his back as he walked to the parking lot, van door closing behind him with the sound of a chapter sealing shut. Later that week, I sat in the downtown courthouse, the air sharp with disinfectant and cold process. Seraphine wasn't there at first, just her attorney, smug and stiff, holding folders like they were shields. When she entered, I almost didn't recognize her. No lipstick, no designer coat, no curated expressions. Just a woman stripped bare by her own story. The hearing was short. Her lawyer read a statement. My client surrenders all claims to the estate of Caleb Varelli, known henceforth in official records as deceased and protected by posthumous privacy statutes. The room was quiet until the judge nodded toward me. The court recognizes Ms. Avon Varelli as interim trustee of the estate, she said, and grants full access and administrative control effective immediately. My breath caught, not from shock, but from justice finally landing. Then Aunt Celeste rose unexpectedly. The judge allowed her statement. She cleared her throat. Seraphine once told me, if I erase Avon, no one will believe her. The courtroom didn't gasp. No outbursts. Just silence so heavy it felt sacred. Seraphine didn't flinch. She stared at the desk in front of her like it owed her an apology. She never looked at me. I didn't need her to. That evening, I went back to Caleb's house for the first time alone. The walls didn't echo with pain anymore, they just sounded like space. I walked room to room, hand trailing along furniture he once built, notes he once scribbled. When I reached the study, I paused in front of the bookshelf. The crack in the drywall where I found his journal had been patched. But I touched it anyway. Then I pulled out a single photo from my coat pocket, just me and him, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning like fools. I placed it on the mantel. Nothing else. No frames of Seraphine. No empty symbols. Just truth. As I turned off the lights and locked the door, I didn't feel loss. I felt reclamation. They took his breath. I took back his name. The courthouse smelled like old paper and pine disinfectant. The scent clung to the air like memory, sterile yet heavy, as if time itself had seeped into the walls and settled in the floorboards. Cool air drifted from the overhead vents, brushing lightly against my neck, stirring the collar of my blouse. I sat in the front row, spine straight, hands folded. Still. Composed. I didn't blink when Seraphine walked in. I didn't need to. I'd already seen all I needed, on grainy security footage, in sworn transcripts, in her rehearsed, hollow apologies that always came too late. Today wasn't about her. It wasn't even about forgiveness. It was about the record. The truth. A clean and final line drawn in ink. Seraphine wore charcoal gray, of course. Sharp-shouldered. Tailored. The fabric too stiff, too clean, like a costume designed to suggest remorse. But she didn't wear it well. Not today. Her posture betrayed her, stiff spine, clenched jaw, hands tucked too carefully in front of her. She was dressed for performance, but there was no stage here. Just a bench, a gavel, and a reckoning long overdue. The judge's voice filled the chamber like slow, steady rain, deliberate, weighted with finality. Ms. Varelli, she said, calm but clear, you have pleaded guilty to multiple counts, including financial fraud, forgery of legal documents, and obstruction of estate proceedings. Due to your cooperation, the voluntary return of misappropriated funds, and full disclosure of the mechanism used to execute said crimes, this court agrees to the terms of the negotiated resolution. Your sentence is suspended. You are hereby barred for life from leading, managing, or representing any non-profit entity. You are required to issue a full public retraction of all previous defamatory claims. Restitution shall be paid in full. Seraphine's attorney stood, gave a short, silent nod, then sat back down. Seraphine didn't move. Not a twitch. The judge turned toward me. Ms. Darrow, she continued, voice firm but almost soft, this court acknowledges your contributions, not only in preserving the legacy of your late brother, Caleb Varelli, but in exposing a pattern of legal exploitation that could have gone unchecked. Your meticulous documentation, timelines, and testimony served as the backbone of this case. You turned grief into accountability. I nodded once. No dramatics. No outburst. Just quiet acknowledgement. The kind that comes after years of being gaslit, disbelieved, dismissed. The stillness of someone who finally laid the truth bare and watched it stand on its own. Then, unexpectedly, Ellis rose. My cousin. The same cousin who once chuckled awkwardly and told me I was being too sensitive when Seraphine called me paranoid. The one who'd argued on her behalf over wine and Sunday brunch. He cleared his throat, adjusting the lapel of his jacket as he stood. Your Honor, I'd like to submit a personal statement. Permission was granted. The room stilled. Ellis glanced at me, then back to the bench. A few months ago, during a family gathering, I overheard Seraphine say something that I didn't understand the weight of until recently. She said, quote, if I erase Avon, no one will believe her. Caleb's the one with anxiety, she's just background noise. His voice cracked faintly. At the time, I brushed it off. I thought it was a bad joke. But I was wrong. It wasn't a joke. It was a strategy. Gasps echoed faintly in the gallery. Seraphine tensed, her jaw tightening. But still, she didn't speak. No denial. No rebuttal. Just silence, her old weapon now turned useless. And then came the final surprise. Griffin Maddox didn't show. Not as a character witness. Not with a letter. Not even with a last-minute attempt at damage control. His absence echoed louder than any statement he could have made. He had taught Seraphine how to weaponize silence, how to isolate Caleb, how to frame concern as instability. And now? He gave her nothing. Just like he gave us nothing when we needed truth. The hearing ended without flair. The gavel struck once. Hard. Final. And just like that, the myth collapsed. The mask fell. The lie disintegrated. 2 weeks later, I stood again on Caleb's front porch. Early spring wind curled through the trees, carrying the scent of damp pine needles, iron from the rusting gutter, and memory. The house had been quiet for weeks, but this silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It felt lighter now. Like the walls had been holding their breath, and finally, they could let it out. The estate lawyer met me on the steps. A kind man with paper-thin patience and kind eyes. He handed me the deed, now cleared of liens, signed over fully. You could sell, he offered. It's a desirable property. Historic. You'd make a profit. I shook my head gently. No. This was never mine to profit from. And I meant it. That afternoon, I submitted the paperwork to transfer the house to a local transitional housing nonprofit. No fanfare. No press release. No Instagram post. Just a quiet nameplate, and a deed signed over to something that mattered. Something that gave second chances. It would be called the Varelli House, a name that would now mean shelter instead of scandal. Before I left the house, I walked its halls one last time. Each room seemed brighter, as if they had been holding sorrow and were finally ready to let go. In the study, I found Caleb's journal. I placed it in a sealed envelope with a note to the foundation director. He was more than a victim. He was a warning, yes, but also a man who loved deeply, who resisted quietly, and who still believed people could change. Later that evening, I drove to a women's shelter in a neighboring town. I wore sunglasses and a long, tan coat. Nobody recognized me. That was the point. I walked to the reception desk, handed the staff a small velvet box, and left without a word. Inside was Seraphine's wedding ring. Polished. Clean. Reset. Let someone else turn that symbol into something new, something protective. Let that pain be repurposed. I didn't need to hold on to it anymore. That night, in my new home nestled against the Blue Ridge foothills, I lit a candle. Not for mourning, there was no grief left to purge. The tears had done their work. This flame was for peace. As I folded laundry and let the day pass quietly, the mail arrived. Mostly bills. And one unmarked envelope. No return address. No handwriting. Inside, a single photograph. It was Caleb and me, leaning against the hood of a pickup truck, grinning at something just out of frame. Our hair a mess, sun in our eyes. Carefree. Before everything. At the bottom corner of the photo, a faint blue thumbprint. His signal. His goodbye. No tears fell. Just a long breath as I placed the photo on my refrigerator, secured with a plain magnet. I stood there for a moment, staring at the image that proved memory could outlive erasure. She tried to erase me, I whispered, voice steady. But I became the footnote she can't delete. A full year had passed, not with a bang, not with a scream, but in silence. The kind of year that doesn't announce itself, that simply slips between the cracks of your life until it's gone. Days folded into each other. Seasons turned like pages I hadn't meant to read. Holidays passed with empty chairs and fuller silences. And in that quiet, I learned how to live inside the house again. The walls stopped echoing his absence. The floorboards stopped mourning every step. The silence stayed, but it stopped hurting. Then came March. March, with its overcast skies and uncertain chill. March, the month of soft rains and memories you can't quite put down. I didn't plan to go that day. I didn't circle it on a calendar or set an alarm. I just woke up and knew. The way you know when something in you shifts. The cemetery sat at the edge of town, tucked behind rows of sycamore trees that creaked in the wind like they, too, remembered. I parked just outside the rusted gate and stood still for a moment, letting the breeze brush against my skin. The air smelled like wet earth and old sorrow, something ancient, like time itself had been soaked through. I followed the gravel path, every step crunching beneath my boots. The grave came into view slowly, like it was waiting for me too. Not demanding. Not accusing. Just there. The new headstone stood quiet and elegant. No angels. No marble grandeur. Just smooth gray stone and sunlight falling across the inscription like a blessing. Caleb Varelli, loved. Lived. Remembered. There was a small stone resting on top of the headstone, smooth, round, thoughtfully placed. I didn't know who had left it. Maybe Mom. Maybe one of the strangers his testimony had protected. Maybe someone he never met but somehow saved. I didn't need to know. The gesture was enough. I knelt down and laid a bunch of wildflowers at the base. Not roses. He hated roses. Too dramatic, he'd say with a half-smile and a raised brow. I could almost hear it, the teasing in his voice, the way he'd make even that sound like affection. The memory made me smile, unguarded and real. It didn't sting this time. There wasn't a ceremony. No candles. No folded hands or whispered prayers. Just me and the wind moving gently through the grass, like the earth was exhaling with me. I placed my palm flat on the cool stone and closed my eyes. This isn't for the dead, Caleb, I said softly. It's for the parts of us that made it out alive. The wind shifted slightly, brushing my hair across my cheek, and I took that as an answer. Standing again, I let my eyes wander over the rows of names etched in stone, names that once meant everything to someone. So many endings. So many beginnings disguised as endings. And for just a second, at the corner of my vision, I saw him. Not clearly. Not like a ghost or an apparition. Just the idea of him. Hands in his coat pockets, head tilted the way he used to when he was trying to understand something fully. Listening without needing to speak. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. His presence was memory, and memory wasn't a wound anymore, it was a companion. I walked away slowly. I didn't look back. Some goodbyes don't need witnesses. They just need truth. They need peace. That night, back in the quiet comfort of my little house tucked into the Blue Ridge foothills, I sat at my desk. A cup of tea cooled beside me, untouched. The lamp cast a warm glow on the wooden floor, and outside, the darkness whispered with the sound of a distant creek and the soft chorus of crickets. I reached for my laptop, an old thing with a dented corner and worn keys. Something pulled me to open it. Not a voice. Not even a thought. Just a pull, like the air had shifted again. Months ago, the lawyer had emailed me a scanned copy of Caleb's journal, something he had kept during the last year of his life, while everything was falling apart, while he was still trying to hold on to something good. I'd opened it once, then closed it. It had felt too raw. Too soon. But tonight felt different. The document loaded slowly. The way old files do. Each line and letter came back to life pixel by pixel, like it was remembering how to be real. I scrolled past the math equations he used to calm himself. His rants about the company. His hopes, written like maybe hope still made sense. And then the last page. A sentence I had never seen. If Avon's reading this, I made it out. If not, I hope she did. It stopped me cold. My breath caught, and I didn't even notice until I had to let it go. I reached out and placed my fingers against the screen, tracing the faint digital imprint of his handwriting, loose and looping, familiar and fragile. That one sentence held everything. A belief in my survival. A lifeline tossed forward in time, hoping I'd catch it. He had believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I closed the laptop slowly, with care, like he might still be on the other side listening. The room felt heavier and lighter at once. Outside, the creek murmured. The night deepened. There was no grand revelation. Just a settling. A peace I hadn't known I was waiting for. The next morning, I made coffee and took it out to the porch. The sky was still wearing its mist, the hills wrapped in a veil of soft gray. The first sip was warm and grounding. A beginning that didn't demand too much. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. No message. I stared at the screen, waiting for something to rise, fear, curiosity, dread. But instead, I smiled. Not every story needs an answer. Not every door needs to open. Some things are meant to remain unfinished. Some silences are their own kind of closure. I looked out toward the tree-line, golden light spreading behind it like a promise not to be rushed. We're okay now, I whispered. I wasn't sure if I was saying it to him or to myself. Maybe both. Then I did the thing Caleb always did when words weren't enough, 2 fingers pressed gently to my heart. And I stepped back inside. Justice doesn't always thunder down in a courtroom. Sometimes, justice is quieter. It arrives in the form of survival. Of healing. Of refusing to carry shame that doesn't belong to you. Sometimes, it doesn't look like victory. It looks like peace. It sounds like breathing without fear. It feels like letting go without forgetting. Justice doesn't always end with a gavel. Sometimes, it ends with a whisper. A step forward. A truth that holds. A love that doesn't vanish. So I'll ask you. What would you do if the people you trusted most tried to bury more than just a body? Would you turn away? Or would you walk into the storm, knowing your truth is stronger than their silence? If this story moved something in you, if it brought back something buried or reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories ahead. True. Raw. Quietly powerful. We're just getting started.